Thanks for tuning into the Sheet Metal Shaping Podcast, where we discuss the pursuit of sheet metal shaping education through traditional coach building techniques. My guest today on the show, Mr. Trent Lewis. What's up? How you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm super.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's gonna be so much fun, man.
You've had quite the guest list, so I feel really honored to be a part of it. So thanks for having me.
Well, you're posting great stuff, and you know what? Every now and again, I see one of your posters pop up, and I'm like, geez, you got to get this guy on. He knows some stuff.
Yeah, enough to keep myself out of trouble, I think.
I love your sign. What's the story about the sign?
Thank you. So I used to be instructor at local technical college, and so I taught welding, primarily like the fab classes, metallurgy classes, and stuff like that. And so I cut out the sign for my shop. So I had my business before I became an instructor, and then of course, afterwards then too. And I just love the logo. A friend of mine came up with the logo for me. So yeah, it's cut out of A36 16 gauge, and then there's a clear acrylic sheet behind it, and then it's kind of like a light box, like backlit then. So
I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I love it. It's awesome. Well, for today, we're going to talk all things Pullmax and beading, offsets, body lines, all that stuff, all the stuff that you post surrounding this tool seems to be pretty profound. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. Why don't we kick it off and tell the folks a little bit about yourself? How did you get started in this?
So I didn't get started until like about college. So when I was in high school, I never did any welding or shop class or anything like that. I was kind of an art geek, lots of drawing, painting. I did do like some sculpture, stuff like that. So that kind of, I guess was a little bit of a segue into what I do now. But it wasn't until, freshman year of college, I was a art major, and I did pretty well in my first semester. Second semester, I was sitting in a lecture hall with like 100 people, and it was like art history since 1955. And this old guy was just up in the front of the class and just pacing back and forth for like a couple hours. And midterm exam came, and I walked in. There was like a 2-question essay and just blank piece of paper, pencils. I grabbed the stuff. I sat down. I looked to both directions. Everybody's just scribbling stuff down. I just grabbed my stuff and I walked out. And so that was the end of university for me. The only class that I ended up staying in was my one sculpture class. So that kind of exposed me to, we did like some oxyacetylene, like welding, brazing, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was big into motorcycles. So I was like part of that same generation of, motorcycle mania, seeing all that stuff. And so when I was a senior year in high school, saving up all my money, working at just, terrible odd jobs. And senior year, I walked in, I bought like a brand new Harley Sportster with all the money that I'd saved up. And
oh, no way.
But I quickly outgrew that. So by the time I kind of was ending my university life, I wanted to build a car. Like I started getting into cars. So I thought I could sell that bike and finance the entire build. And no, but
few more parts on a car than a bike, right?
Yep, exactly. So, and that sculpture professor that I had, he had like a 50 Chevy, and I really liked that. So that was kind of what I was trying to do, and I ended up getting a 50 Ford instead.
Nice.
And enrolled in the auto body school at the technical college, and I wanted to be a painter. And then I started painting cars and realized I just don't like the mess. I don't like the cross your fingers. It's a chemistry experiment, like ready to go wrong at any time. And but I really liked like my welding class. And that was the first time I welded. I was like 20, 21 maybe by that time. And
isn't that interesting how you're taking bits and pieces of sculpture and welding and different things that you'll learn along the way and saying, okay, none of that is me, but this is me over here. And then you're like, boom, this is how we're going to proceed.
Yep. And I like the technical aspect of it then too. That's something that like I've always been into, are like the different crafts or, fields of study that are out there that are kind of right brain and left brain. So there's a creative side to it, but then there's also like a huge technical side to it. You're either doing it right or you're doing it wrong kind of thing.
Yep.
So after I went through the auto body program, I went through the welding program, and the main instructor that I had was actually like one of my dad's like good friends growing up. And they used to like race like the dirt track cars in like the 60s and 70s. And he was a big like, street rod guy then too. So he was like a huge help, like in not only my education, learning there, like at the school, but like everything like after hours. So I had some previous welding experience from the auto body program. So I was able to like fly through a lot of the curriculum of in the welding program pretty quickly. So he allowed me to like bring in like my fenders for like my 50 Ford and like work on stuff in there. I built like the floors in the sheet metal lab. I hope I'm not getting him into trouble saying all this, but and then after college, so I was building that first car in my grandma's garage. My grandpa had passed away, and she had never driven in her life, so she didn't have a car. So I kind of took over the 2-car garage, and it was somewhat insulated and one outlet, and every time I struck an arc in there, the lights would dim in the house. But my grandma was, getting up there in age, and she wanted to move into kind of like a, retirement home kind of thing, less responsibilities and things. So I wasn't done with the car yet. So that welding instructor of mine, he's like, you can bring it down to my shop and you can work on it here. And so, I owe that guy like a huge amount, like, for helping me out in my career. It was big. So
what is the importance of a mentor to you?
What's important for them?
No, what is the importance of a mentor to you as a student?
Oh God. I don't think anybody is like self-made. I think there are people that really help you along the way. They're not necessarily going to give you all the answers, but they can point you in the right direction of like whatever is going to fit, your application, I guess, because I have mentors that are welding mentors. I've got ones that are fabrication mentors, retired machinists. Like I'm like friends with all like these old guys, and they're all like experts in their own, craft. And so I think, what they can offer you and what you can offer them too. I think if you're showing that you're eager, to learn, from them, that they're willing to go extra miles, and bring you in, and let you use their shop, let you use their equipment and stuff like that. So
there definitely is a reciprocity there. I think you're right.
Oh, totally.
If you're willing to come and put in the time and listen to what they have to say, and then actually try the way that they're recommending. I mean, any teacher looking to impart wisdom on somebody else would appreciate the fact that somebody cares, right? And they want to learn. Oh
yeah. I mean, that you got to have a passion, I think in anything that you're doing, whether it's, cooking or, being a metal shaper or being a machinist or, doing auto body painting, like you've got to be passionate about what you want to do, and I think once you think that you've perfected your craft and then you want to teach it to other people, I think that's where you get a deeper understanding of your craft, is when you have to learn how to teach it to other people, and be an effective teacher, because there's some that, they're just there, for a paycheck, but it's no different than any other job, and there's other ones that really care, and they're the ones that stand out, and, the ones that former students stay in contact with, and, things like that. So
it's really neat when you find a teacher who's also, who's willing to give up their time, but also has a way of delivery that you really you
Oh, yeah.
resonate with and understand? Because not everybody can deliver. They can do, right? But
Mhm.
just because you can play football doesn't mean you can coach it. Right? You got to be able to
Yes.
understand the way people operate and the way that they think. Right? Totally different skill set, I would
Yep.
imagine.
Yeah, and I think that's that has to be kept in mind. I mean, most of the people that are in like the kinds of fields that that we're talking about are mostly visual learners, and so that's why like it doesn't really make much sense to be in a lecture class, for metallurgy, and you're just up there, yakking for 2 hours. So when I would teach the metallurgy, it, I'll back up. It wasn't that way my first semester. My first semester was like survival mode,
Oh yeah.
So it was just staying one step ahead of the students and going right from the book. So if there's any former students from first semester listening, I 100% apologize. But yeah, I mean, you've got to keep that in mind, too. So like we would do like 15 minutes, half-hour lecture, and then go out and let's put it to use. We're talking about stress strain on materials. Okay, let's see what I'm talking about, real world application kind of thing. So
yeah, well, let's go there. Let's talk about putting it to use. So when did you start your shop, and how did that come to be?
So I got married in 2009. And prior to that, I had like my first real customer contact me. He had just moved from New Jersey to Wisconsin. His kids lived in Wisconsin, and him and his wife had retired. And so he had his car that he had since he was 16 and needed it finished. So it needed like, a bunch of like firewall floor work, some cowl patches, roof insert. And it was on a 34.5 window coupe.
Yeah.
And so he called me up because he got a number from, one of those old experts, old hot rod veteran. And I'm like, at that time we had just like a car club shop, and I didn't want to bring a customer project in there. And so I said, well, I'll be 100% honest with you. I said, my girlfriend is moving back to the US in like 3 months, and I'm going to get married. I'm going to buy a house and with a shop. And he's like, just laying it all on him. And he's like, all right, I'll wait.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, it was like 3 months later, got married. Our realtor showed up at like our wedding reception, and he brought the acceptance letter from the sellers, and
best wedding gift going.
So,
right?
Oh God, yeah, I was like 27. I was totally naive to like really what all I was getting into, but it obviously worked out for the best. And sometimes you just need to do that. You need to take a risk, and
so is that where you operate out of now, the same shop that you bought back then, home shop?
No, we moved about 5 years ago to the place that we're at right now. So a little bit bigger house, bigger shop, more land, further out. So the older I get, the more, I want like all those, get a little bit further out of town, a little bit more space, and, things like that. So,
yeah. What's the importance of somebody operating at home versus operating out of a commercial unit? Because I'm sure other people in the craft or in the skilled trades that have not just a home shop or not just a commercial unit. Maybe they have both, maybe they have neither, maybe they have one or the other. What's the importance of the way that you're doing it versus the way that others have done in the past?
So, I mean, I've always, other than the time that I was teaching, I've always had my shop and my business next to the house. There's definitely pros and cons to it. Pros is you're keeping your overhead low, which is a contributing factor to what your labor rate is. So, compared to like what our competitors and stuff are like that do the same thing, I think we're pretty low. But it's also, our location too. We're in middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, so it doesn't cost as much as say like Southern California to have a shop. So that's a big plus. Where some cons can kind of come in is that it's hard to separate your professional life from your personal life. So just when you think you're done for the day, there's somebody pulling up, or they pull up to the shop on like a Saturday and you're not in there. So then they go to the house, and so yeah, it can get a little bit tricky that way, but the further out you go, the less likely people are going to want to stop in too. So
true. Do you find a lot of people that are your customers are coming for a purpose, like, or are they just dropping into because I heard your name?
I have had those people come in, and that's fine. That's fine with me, because they've got to make some kind of an introduction, anyways. And so yeah, that's fine. Usually they'll contact me through like email or calling or whatever, just to set up, time, make sure I'm there. Customers do that too, just to make sure everything's, we're around. We're not, necessarily maybe meeting with another client or anything like that. So, and then other ones, I mean, we've had customers like where they've just been into the shop once, when they drop the car off, or, during the process. Or I've had ones where they've never been in the shop, so, and then, we will work with other shops too, like we'll subcontract with other shops. And I've heard other people talking about that on other podcasts, maybe yours as well, talking about, the amount of work that's out there versus the shops that can do certain things. And so, I mean, I've had people like question why I do that. They're like, aren't they your competition? I'm like, no, they're not my competition at all. Like, we can be business associates and we can feed each other, work. I don't do body and paint, or upholstery or, stuff like that. So I need shops that have those capabilities to refer my customers to. And
I think that was Mike from Cornfield Customs, episode 1, that talked about that. There's just so much work to go around. Not everybody can do everything.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, I think, to, not have good relations with other shops because you think that they're your competitors. I've never like understood that.
So are you getting fed work from other places that say, hey, we build great hot rods, but we're a chassis company. We don't do body. Go see Trent to, build the fender, build the roof, build the whatever, and then come on back when you're done. Do you get that?
Yeah. Yep. I think they don't have like the machines, they don't have the skill set, or a combination of both. And, it's a high-end build, so they want, a certain level of quality. And other times they just don't have the time to devote to it because, they've got one metal guy and he also does body, paint, and assembly, too. So, yeah, that it can be the case. It can be, we don't have the equipment or the knowledge or the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. In terms of some of the technical stuff, so let's dive into a little bit about what you're working on, and let's get technical. Let's talk Pullmax and all the things we mentioned earlier in the episode. So, what are you working on right now? What's in the shop?
So right now we're finishing up a '66 Mustang coupe that's in the shop. That's been huge undertaking. There's so much stuff that has gone on that I haven't posted because I don't think it's necessarily, interesting. I mean, doing like tons of mock-up. There's lots of different, state of the art, like, electrical systems and cameras, and, it's just part of the build process, and all the related fab that's kind of around it. And, so yeah, we're down to like the last like major part of the fab on that, and that's going to be finishing up the hood. So then everything's going to get kind of blown apart, and then we're going to be priming it and then getting it down to the customer. He's from the Houston, Texas area. So,
wow.
So we want to make sure everything's sealed. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, I want to make sure everything's sealed up before it goes down there, because it can get, pretty humid there, and things can start flash rusting. So we're going to put it in primer for him. So yeah, he's been a great client to work with. He knows what he wants. He makes decisions, and he's got good taste too. So that's awesome.
That does make a big difference. Just because you have money doesn't mean you have good taste.
Yep. Sometimes they're difficult conversations to have with clients, but most of the time you get that out of the way, like during the initial kind of meet and greet.
Sure.
And
you ever butt heads with somebody where you're like, this is just not going to work?
For the most part, no. I think early on in my career, like working at other shops,
yeah,
and I didn't really have to deal with it. It was like, well,
like, I'm hands off. I don't know.
You better go up to the front office, and talk to the owner about this one. So, but for the most part, I think we've established ourselves as a shop where kind of know what we're doing, and but I'm open to other ideas, and at the end of the day, it's the customer's money,
Sure.
and what they want. They want kind of deal, as long as it's not like way out there. If it's way out there, then I got kind of put my foot down. But before I do that, I like to give them options, and then tell them, like, if this is mine, here's the option that I would go with.
Sure.
And then it seems to go pretty well then.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day too, you can turn out whatever somebody wants, right?
Yep.
And good, bad, or indifferent, it could be whatever they ask for. It's fine. But like, you have a reputation to uphold as well. And if you put out trash
100%.
just because somebody ordered trash and you're like, okay, I'll build that. I mean, it might reflect poorly on you at some point in the future, and that's obviously not what you want.
Yep. I agree 100%. Yeah. So we've got that car. We've got a 32 Ford Vicky in the shop too. That guy's, somewhat local. He's like 45 minutes away, I think. And we've done a few, cars for him in the past. Not necessarily like full builds, but like we'll do like the metal repair. We did, sections of another car, stuff like that. And he's been, great to work with too. So he's another one, great style. He's a big 32 guy. So that's pretty much what we've been doing for him for a few years now, is just working on those collections of 32s. But so we've got that one in there, and then we're finishing up the 35 DeSoto Airflow Coupe. That's the one we did the fadeaway body lines on, like the tail panel. So again, repeat customer. He's been great to work with. He's got really good style. He's huge Art Deco guy, so a lot of his cars are from that era. He's been phenomenal to work with. And then the other car that we've got, so I don't have a very big shop. It's only 2,500 square feet.
Dude,
so
you must be packed.
Oh, it's tough to deal with sometimes, but most of the equipment is on casters, except for, the big ticket items.
Yeah.
And then I'm just, OCD, organization, freak. I mean, I've got a robot vacuum cleaner in the shop,
That's awesome.
So, the last car that we've got in the shop is a 65 Mustang Fastback, and that one currently is mine. And that's why you don't see much progress on it. That's like,
I'll get to that one day.
Yeah. It's like the shoemaker's kid goes barefoot kind of mentality.
That's right.
But I'm going to devote time to it here once we've kind of got fall cleanup, done, and we're ready to batten down the hatches for winter. And because I don't do anything in the winter other than like work and maybe go someplace warm for like a week, but like I don't snowboard anymore. Like I'm too old. I'm afraid I'm gonna fall down and break a hip, get in the hospital, and I don't, never snowmobiled. I'm not into that kind of stuff. So I like to work in the winter time. So I think by spring I'll have something on the chassis table that's going to resemble a car, and at that point I've got a few people that are interested in it, but I'll probably put it out there. It'll be a project that'll be for sale, buy into it for X amount of dollars, and then, sign the contract. It gets finished here kind of deal.
Yeah.
So I think on that one, I'm going to be I'm going to be pretty firm on, the ideas and direction that it's going to go into. So I'll be putting my foot down more on like ideas for that thing, but it's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be kind of, street car, road race car. It has a 7.3 liter Godzilla engine in it, and T56 6-speed transmission, C5 Corvette rear suspension with an 8.8 inch differential, and then aftermarket independent front suspension. I'll do 315 tires all around, and it's gonna be pretty cool. So
nice. All right, let's hop into the metal stuff. A Pullmax. For the folks who don't know, who are maybe unaware about what a Pullmax is, let's start from the very, very basics. What is a Pullmax?
It's basically a reciprocating hammer, something that you don't want die-on-die contact ever. But really, your limitations are your imagination. There's so much that you can do with it: beading, offset, louvering, doming. Doing multiple like step, I've got some dies that they're like step 1, step 2 die, and doing like wire edging, for instance, things like that.
It's amazing.
It is definitely, what's that?
It's amazing how versatile it is, really.
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely a machine I could not live without. And I posed that question to like some other professionals one time. I'm like, what are the, if you had to start over, like, what are the 3 tools that you'd be allowed to take with you to start over? And for me, it would be Pullmax, my TIG welder, and my Milwaukee planching hammer.
Ooh, nice.
I think you can pretty much do, anything that you want with it. With those, items. So, but then the more you get, kind of the more spoiled you get, then you want like doubles of things and, stuff like that.
I want a power hammer with 2 heads so we don't have to change out the shrinking dies. Like, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Now I'd like to have one for every radius, that's out there. So you don't have to, but then I'll truly not have any room in for projects,
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so a Pullmax, in terms of size and scale and what they can be, how small and maybe how large they can go, what's the footprint of a typical machine that somebody might see?
So I've got a P5, which I think is pretty much kind of like the medium-sized one. I think it's probably 5 feet tall, maybe the same like deep. I've got mine like raised up a little bit just so the tool is at a better level, and then I put casters on it too, even though I don't move it around, but I'll have to swing it out of the way just in case, because I've got a car and I've got my power hammer now close to it, so it's every little inch counts. So yeah, I would say that's kind of like medium size. Like the small ones are, probably about as like thin as like, those power bead rollers that we were talking about. Like they're like the P1s, or they might even not even have a P in front of them. I don't remember. I've only seen like a couple come up on eBay, and they're kind of cool machines. I'd almost like to get one of those when I add on to the shop.
I had Stacy David. He was the guest host of Trucks and Gears TV and some other stuff. And he was on the show, and he was talking about one made by Dake, and it was just a little guy. It was like, it was bench top size, if you will. And like, what a handy tool. He was like, I use it for thumbnail dies, and I think he's got some urethane dies or something in it for doming and stuff. And what a terrific tool. They're expensive. Like you pay a lot for them.
They are.
Especially relative to the size. Because I mean, sometimes you can get a full size one for the same price as a small one, and you're like, what the heck? It's like a quarter of the machine. But
yep. So I bought my P5 back in 2012, I think it was. And it was out in Ohio, and I paid $1,950 for it. That included shipping to my door in Wisconsin.
Oh my
and
gosh.
So I got some tooling with it, the lower center tool holder, and all the fencing, circle cut attachment, and it's like painted this like hideous blue color. It's like an Earl Scheid paint job. Like they painted over wires and everything. And all I did was drain out the oil that was in it, fill it up, and I've never had to do anything to it.
That's awesome. They're kind of, as long as you don't bottom out the dies, I would think they're pretty indestructible, no?
Yeah, I mean they're made by Swedes, you know, the Scandinavians know how to build stuff, and they still make them, and they're coming through the same like hub in Chicago, like where all the brass tags are on the original ones that you can find in the U.S. here, but they're a lot more than $1,950. Yeah, the Dake makes one, and then is it Trick Tools that bought the minimax? I think that was a clay cook machine, and then there was one that was in Minnesota. It was the Anoka powerhammer, and that was very similar to those as well. And then I think, does Stan Fulton make one?
I don't know. He makes a lot of dies, but I don't know if he makes the machine itself.
Yep. Okay.
Let's talk about machine setup. So you're standing in front of the Pullmax. You got this big C-shaped machine looking thing, and you got a handful of dies. What next?
Well, I guess you got to figure out what material that you're using, thickness of the material. You know, you always want to make sure that I just rotate the weight that's on the shaft to make sure that's not going to bottom out. So I know exactly where, you know, bottom dead center is on the machine in relation with the thickness of the material. I'll do test runs with that same thickness of material to make sure everything looks right. You know, you've got to, you know, either increase or decrease the gap that's between your tools, like the length of the machine then too, with it's like a little set screw where you turn it in or out, just to make sure you're not going to be, you know, damaging the material, slicing it up, or you know, destroying your dies too. So just doing test run. I've never you know, just gone up with the piece that you spent all this time making and just, you know, just run metal through it. It's just a terrible concept. So, yeah, we're always, you know, doing test pieces, making adjustments to the fencing, whatever that, you know, you got to do, until you feel confident and it looks right, you know, and you always compare it to if they're going to be butting up to adjacent, you know, original material, you know, how does it look? You know, that's the big thing, you know? So, because us being, you know, doing just the metal fab and mock up to a car to the point, you know, if we're doing a complete car, it's ready to get blown apart, bodywork and painted. And so, you know, you want those cars to, you know, when they go to the client or they go back to the shop that subcontracted you, that, you know, there's nothing that you're hiding from, you know, or you don't want body lines sculpted out of Bondo and, you know, stuff like that. So, so that the setup, the prep work is really what takes, you know, the longest, you know, fit up and things like that. And, you know, unless you're doing it, it's hard for people to understand that concept.
Right. The time is, that's where the time is.
Oh yeah. Yep. And like when we're doing like floor pans, tunnels, and, you know, things like that, like the last thing that we do on them is doing the bead work. And I've had so many people like comment on that, like on posts where I've got the floor pans are clecoed in and there's a tunnel clecoed in, and they're like, you know, that thing would be a lot stronger if you put some beads in it. And it's like, yeah, I know, but like, this, as soon as you put beads in it and then you got to put floors in it, it's usually right where you've got a bead that you've got a seat bracket that's got a mount to it. And that's why you just wait until everything's been mocked up and, you know, do the final details at that point. So
it is really cool when you can plan the sequence of events, as you're saying, and all of the beads end up wrapping around all of the different contours and the different constraints of that seat bracket, for example, because it looks purposeful. Like you meant to do that because you did.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. 100%. Yeah. I was doing a car I was about maybe 3/4 of the way through building the car when I got my Pullmax machine.
Mhm.
And that car ended up going out to Detroit Autorama and to compete out there for the Riddler in 2016. And he won a Pirelli Grade 8, and then it went on for like a year, the show circuit, and he won a bunch of awards with it, and out to Battle of the Builders and stuff in SEMA and everything. And so I built the chassis for it, and then ran all the exhaust and stuff through there before I even built the floors. And so when I built the floors, like all the different bends of the floors, and then eventually the beading and stuff like followed the way that the chassis snake throughout front and back. Same with the exhaust, so you're kind of following all those functions, and it all works together. And so that's part of that right brain, left brain kind of thing, duality.
Yeah. In your opinion, what's more important, the execution or the design?
God, that's a really good question. I think you have to have, I think, the right look, because if you've got the right look and you're 50 feet away, you're like, oh, I'm going to go take a look at that car. And then as you start getting closer, you might notice that the execution, is bad. But, so you need, first of all, you got to have the right design, to it. But yeah, they're both equally as important, so that's
your inner sculpting class coming out. You're like, how is this going to look when we're done? How can we sculpt this thing to perfection?
Yeah, well, it was pretty ingrained in me as a youngster to, if you're not going to do it right, then don't do it at all.
Yeah.
My dad was a big, he said that quite a bit, and
it's okay if you mess up a sculpture in plaster, it's abstract art. You just change the format.
That's true. Yeah. When Jackson Pollock said, I don't accept mistakes, or I don't acknowledge mistakes, or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think first of all, you've got to have something that's gonna, people are gonna gravitate towards it, and
sure.
And it's got to have form and function. Some of those cars that go out to Detroit, I mean, they're not even drivable, if people wanted to drive them, I think it's changed, over the years, that way. But, so yeah, I think people need to make sure that, they don't forget that it's actually a car, too. So, but yeah, the execution for me is it's huge, and I hold the guys that work for me to a high standard, and I try not to micromanage, but if I see them doing, something that, I think can be done better or whatever, then I make sure that I show them, and that's how they get better. And that's how I got better. I was pushed by other people, and if you want to be, successful in the idea that you want to be as good as you can be, it's important that you are able to take feedback and do the best that you can do.
Yeah. You'd made a post on Instagram a little while back about a fadeaway body line. So driving down the same path as talking about the Pullmax, right? You did this fadeaway body line, which turned out really nice. For anybody, check out his Instagram. It's, what is it? Midwest Metalworks on Instagram?
Midwest Metalworks. Yep.
Check out his Instagram. Really, really cool. And you did this beautiful fadeaway body line on the tail of a car. Let's talk about that. How did you set up the machine for that? How did you plan for that before you even turn the machine on?
Yeah, so I used a universal die holder, and then just cut down some Delrin stock, which we have a bunch of. So I've used Delrin, I've used aluminum, or I've done hardwood too. Whatever's going to be quick to cut out. So we just cut the stuff out in our vertical bandsaw, and then just kind of grind in the leads and stuff on it, do some test runs and things with it. we had of course, the original body there to go off of to get everything correct. And so the Delrin's nice because it doesn't mar up the material, and it was on kind of a sweeping radius, and then it fades out. It's more aggressive where it was butting up to the adjacent original material, and then it like follows the trunk opening and fades out. And so I set up my fencing on the Pullmax on the dovetail, and I use just a round piece of like pipe that I welded a cap on the end and put a bushing in, so it'll turn with the material. And then you just follow the curvature of the material on the edge, and then I just slowly release the pressure and create a bigger gap between the dies to do it, and did that on a test piece of course before going to the big dance kind of thing. So
and for that you're talking about the fade out, slowly releasing the pressure.
Yep. So
like a multi-person operation.
Yeah. So that was honestly, that was the first time I've ever done a fadeaway bodyline. Yeah. So I was pretty happy with that. So, but
what's the difference for you between a Pullmax and a bead roller? We talked about it loosely before the show, but I mean, they're two very different tools, but do very similar things. What's the difference for you, and why do you prefer the Pullmax?
I think just like what we were talking about, just the versatility of the Pullmax. I think the quality of the bead that you're going to get from it. I think it's just a better product in the end. However, I sold my bead roller. I had a nice 36-inch Baileigh electric bead roller, and I sold that when I got my Pullmax because I'm like, I don't need that bead roller anymore. And now I really, really wish that I would have one. And so we might maybe get one once we put the addition onto the shop, because we've got no more room left.
Nice.
But thankfully, my friend in his shop has one. He's like 25 minutes away. So I'll just text him like, hey, can I borrow your bead roller for like half hour or 20 minutes? And it's usually like on those like small little areas where you don't necessarily want to build a fence for it, or the client doesn't want to spend the money, or things like that, and it's just it's just one of the let's just get it kind of done kind of things. And so I mean, that's where bead rollers are nice. With Pullmaxes, you can go with your fencing, you can go over the thing and increase the depth of the bead, or as long as you're not going to put too much stress on that material and cause a failure. I mean, that's where you can get like the stamping kind of quality look to it. Whereas bead roller, it's like you got one shot and that's it kind of thing. So. But I mean, they definitely have their purpose for sure. I just prefer the Pullmax.
Making tooling for a bead roller versus a Pullmax, very different.
Yeah. You need a lathe obviously for bead roller. Pullmax. I mean, I think maybe there's like a few Pullmax dies that I use like my Bridgeport to make. Otherwise they're done in like vertical bandsaw and stuff like that. So when I first got that machine, I would spend like a weekend or like a good Saturday like making a die or two, and at this point, like I like using the universal holders and just making the stuff that's going to be low production. Like that's my go-to.
For sure.
And then like with that fadeaway body line, it had to be Delrin just because of the crazy like reverse curve shape that was on it. I was just afraid like if we had one out of steel or something that it would, start chopping on it with, die chatter and stuff like that, and not want to track very well. So, so that's another reason why I end up going with the Delrin.
Yeah. And the Delrin held up for the one time that you had to do it?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. Awesome. We're ready for the next DeSoto tail pan.
That's awesome. What else can you do in a Pullmax? You mentioned flanging and things like this. Same process, different die?
Yeah, so I've got a few different dies that I've done for flanging. Like I use that die quite a bit. And it's got its own back gauge to it, so you can kind of set it out for different size flanges. And that first one's mainly just to kind of almost score the flange, and you can pick up on it a little bit. And then from there, it can go into like you can either hammer and dolly the stuff over from there, or if you're doing like a hem edge, or it can go into the power hammer with the linear stretch, and start arcing the stuff around. So you're using that as like a in the past we've done that with like drive shaft tunnels and transmission tunnels, where then they're mounting up, that flange is mounting up to the firewall or rear floor panels and stuff like that. So that one gets used quite a bit. Our offset dies get used quite a bit. So those go-to ones, they're made out of just low carbon 1018 steel, and some of them I case hardened, mainly because I would do that for the students when I taught metallurgy. I'd bring in 1018, and we'd do a hardness test of 1018, and then we do the case hardening compound. Then we would do a Rockwell superficial test and see what a difference it would make, and we would get the same results if it with that case hardening as you would with like say S7 tool steel.
Really? Off of 1018?
Yep. But I mean, it's very thin. Yeah. So you've got kind of the best of both worlds. You've got a hardened like outer crust, like so to speak, and then you've got a very ductile, soft like inner core, so it can it can absorb a little bit with that. So
I've never had anybody on the show explain the process. So for the people listening, can you explain that process of how that works?
Yeah, so the compound that we'd get it through McMaster-Carr. It was called Cherry Red. And so step one, heat your part to cherry red in color. I don't remember exactly offhand like what that temperature is. I would pass out like color charts and stuff for heat signatures and things. And so as I'm doing it, I'd have them shout out what color changes we're going into, just keep everybody
engaged.
Yep. And so you bring it up to cherry red, then you dump the stuff on the surface that you want it to. Or I've seen it like where people have like a little like dunk tank that they'll dab this stuff into, and then you remove it from that compound, and then you heat it back up to cherry red, and then you quench it. You can quench it in oil, water. I guess it. I don't think we ever looked at the difference of the quenching mediums of it, but water is definitely going to quench things faster, so that might produce a harder result then. And then when you're done, then you just wire wheel it, and then it's done. It doesn't look pretty, it's kind of dark gray and kind of blotchy and things like that, but it holds up pretty well too. But if you're constantly running like material through it, it's going to wear pretty quick.
Right. And what would the application typically be for something like that?
For case hardening?
Yeah. So is it a planishing hammer die? Is it a
Pullmax
die? What would you use it for?
We used it on like Pullmax dies and stuff, like where you're feeding material in, stuff like that. But the more you do it, then it's just going to start wearing that surface off. My power hammer dies and my planishing hammer dies that I've made were out of S7 tool steel. And so my power hammer dies, I sent those away and did I had somebody else do the heat treatments on those. I made a few planishing hammer dies, and then I went over to the school on like a weekend and used their metallurgy ovens and got like the isothermal diagrams and did all heat treatments on that. And I'm like, well, I'm never doing this again. Like, I'm just gonna pick up the phone and buy dies. And so that's what I did when I needed more.
Yeah.
So it's cool to know the process and know like what all goes into it, because I think you get a different look at the materials and the parts and the machines and things like that. And I think that relationship is important. And then just knowing that, okay, this is a lot of work just for 2 dies. I'm not going to do this again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, especially too, if you're on billable hours, like you got to think, what's the customer paying for? And does this make sense?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, and that's a reason why we do like the Delrin stuff, because they can, I think it took maybe 20 minutes, to make 20 minutes, half hour to make that Delrin die for the fadeaway body line. And then, by the time we were done, like testing things and making some adjustments, it was maybe at the most like 45 minutes, and then we're ready to run, kind of deal. And whenever I had to make like, the more intricate dies and stuff like that, that are staying with the shop, I would do all that stuff on my own time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
for the folks listening that are maybe thinking about starting a shop just like you've done, and they're on the way in and they're kind of new to the industry, how would you recommend that they set a labor rate depending on where they're based out of?
You want to see like what other shops are charging out there, but that doesn't necessarily mean like that's what you're going to do. You've got to take into account, just your operating costs, on average, like energy wise, you're going to need insurance. You can't have enough insurance. So you got to have a garage keeper's policy. You've got to have liability. I would certainly recommend an umbrella policy. If you want to transport customer projects and things like that, then you've got to have a cargo policy, which is really expensive. So all that stuff kind of plays into account. You got to think about, well, what do you want to pay yourself then too? Just starting out, you're going to have to, probably lower that down quite a bit until you can get, a clientele established and a reputation and things like that. So you want to be competitive, but, you don't want to be greedy, either. So, there's a lot of things that go into those things too, and so we're time and materials, but it doesn't cover every single piece of material that's out there. So like you can't account for how much shielding gas was used on this client's car today for this hour, and stuff like that. So there's some stuff that's got to get rolled in that are just consumables in that sense.
Yeah, the consumables add up too, right? And like gas, as you mentioned, welding wire, sandpaper, roll-lock discs, all of these things. They add up quick. You go through a box of roll-lock discs, you think nothing of it, but those are expensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Yep. So, I look for, the best price, for the best quality stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily in an aristocrat shop when it comes to that. Like, where we're buying, the most expensive items, because some cases they're not the best. And, some of that stuff, roll-lock discs and things like that. We get like pretty middle of the road stuff. Like DA paper is like insanely expensive, but because we're using it on bare metal, it doesn't matter if you've got like the really high-end expensive stuff or you got kind of the middle of the road, like it's all going to burn up quick. So we just buy like the middle of the road stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, this has been fun, man, to have you on the show and to talk about all of the things that we covered. We covered from everything from how you got started to the importance of a mentor, to starting your shop and making panels, and now in the back end setting labor. We covered a ton of ground today. So for everybody listening, from me to you, thanks so much for being on the show. Where can people find out more about you and follow what you're working on?
So you can just follow along with Instagram, so at Midwest Metalworks, or you can type in my name, Trent Lewis. I'm on Facebook too, but it's pretty much the same stuff that I post on there is on Instagram goes onto that account. So that's the best place to find me. It's been great. I appreciate it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks for tuning into the Sheet Metal Shaping podcast. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.